All right, today we're diving deep into a really challenging idea. What if a concept at the very heart of modern faith, the idea of being born again, has been misunderstood for, well, centuries? We're going to look at an argument that the washing of regeneration is something completely different than what most of us have been taught. Let's get into it.
So the whole argument we're exploring kicks off with this pretty intense claim. It says that the nations have inherited lies and that this deception is most obvious in how modern Christianity talks about regeneration and renewal. I mean, that's a huge statement, right? It's basically calling for a complete rethink of some foundational beliefs.
And that, of course, leads us right to the big question. If the common understanding is a lie, like our source material claims, then what's the truth? Well, to even begin to answer that, we've got to peel back the layers and get back to the original first-century Hebraic perspective.
So first up, this idea of an inherited lie. The claim is a big one, that a core belief has been off track for a long, long time. So let's figure out where this whole argument even comes from. We got to trace it back to the source.
It's pretty wild, but this entire massive argument, it all hinges on how you read one single verse. Just one. It's from Paul's letter to Titus, and the two little words that spark this whole firestorm are right in there.
Okay, here it is. By the washing of regeneration and renewing of the Holy Ghost. See that? Paul mentions two very distinct things, the washing of regeneration and the renewing of the Holy Ghost. Now, the argument we're looking at says these are not just some fuzzy spiritual feelings. No, they're two very specific, very connected steps in a single divine process.
So that means we've got to redefine these terms. We're going to break down the original Greek words and, crucially, see how they plug back into a much older Hebrew way of thinking about God's covenant.
Okay, let's start with regeneration. The Greek word is Palingenesia. Now, a lot of people think of this as an emotional new birth experience. But this perspective says, nope, it's something much more specific, almost legal. It's a covenant restoration. It's about being brought back into proper relationship, made fit to be in God's family again.
And this Greek idea, it's totally anchored in an older Hebrew concept, the word chadash. Now, chadash isn't about making something brand new out of thin air. It's about restoring, repairing, or renewing something that was already there but got broken. So think of it like this. Regeneration isn't building a totally new house. It's taking a beautiful historic home and restoring it to its original intended glory.
All right, then there's the second part, renewal, or anakainosis. Now, if regeneration is restoring the house, renewal is the lifelong renovation project that happens inside the house. It's this ongoing process where the Spirit is constantly working to realign our hearts and our minds with God's original blueprint.
But why? What's the point of all this renovation? Well, it's not just to feel good. The goal is super practical. It's Spirit-empowered Torah obedience. I mean, the prophet Ezekiel basically said that the whole point of God putting His Spirit in us is to cause us to walk in His statutes. So the big takeaway here is that renewal isn't an end in itself. It's designed to produce a specific result, obedience.
Okay, so if this whole reinterpretation is legit, you'd expect to find clues for it all over the Bible, right? Not just in one isolated verse. And that's exactly where we're headed next, to look at what the source material calls the scriptural witnesses.
First, let's go way back to the foundation, the Torah itself. Here in Deuteronomy, Moses predicts a time when God himself will perform a kind of, a spiritual heart surgery, a circumcision of the heart. And the purpose? To make it possible for his people to love and obey him from the inside out. The argument is that this regeneration we're talking about is the ultimate fulfillment of that ancient promise.
Next up, the prophets. Jeremiah echoes this exact same idea. He talks about a new covenant where the Torah won't be an external thing on stone tablets anymore, but will be written directly on our hearts. This is a perfect picture of regeneration and renewal working together. First, God restores the heart, and then He renovates it by writing His instructions on it.
And finally, we see the apostolic writings tying it all together. When Paul talks to the Ephesians about a washing of water by the Word, the argument is he's referring to the very same concept. And what is the word that does the washing? According to this view, it's the Torah. God's instructions are the very thing that cleanse and restore.
Okay, so that's the what. We've defined the terms. But what about the how? How does this whole process of restoration and renewal actually play out in a person's life? Well, the source calls it the covenant mechanism.
The whole thing is laid out as a path called teshuvah, which is just Hebrew for return. And notice it's a path, an active journey, not just a one-time feeling. It starts when you recognize, hey, I'm living outside of God's instructions. Then you actively seek that cleansing, that regeneration. You submit to the Spirit's ongoing renewal process. And the result? Obedience to the Torah isn't a chore anymore. It becomes the natural, joyful way you live.
All right, this is where the rubber really meets the road. Let's put these two ideas side by side, the common, modern view versus this first-century Hebraic understanding we've been unpacking.
So, at the highest level, here's the fundamental difference. Is it an emotional rebirth, something that's mostly internal and feeling-based? Or is it a covenant restoration, something that's functional and relational? Let's dig a little deeper into what that means.
This chart really spells it out. Look, in the common view, regeneration is an emotional rebirth. In the Hebraic view, it's a covenant restoration. Renewal becomes a vague spiritual refresh versus spirit-led Torah obedience. And this is a huge one. Does grace abolish the law, or does grace establish the Torah by empowering us to live it? It completely flips the script on salvation too. It's not an escape from responsibility, but a restoration to our original purpose and function.
And really, it all boils down to this one key idea: restoration, not replacement. The whole point of the new covenant, from this perspective, isn't to throw out the old and start over. It's to restore what was broken.
So who makes all this possible? Well, according to this view, it's all fulfilled in Yeshua. He's seen as the walking, talking Torah. He didn't come to get rid of the instructions. He came to embody them perfectly and to make it possible for his people to do the same through this process of regeneration and renewal. Okay, let's do a quick recap of these redefined terms, just so it all sinks in. Regeneration equals restoration. Renewal is renovation. Grace isn't a free pass. It's empowerment for obedience. Mercy is the cleansing that makes it all possible. Justification is being brought into Torah alignment. And salvation? That's being restored to full covenant functionality.
And all of this leaves us with one last, massive question to think about. What changes if the new covenant was never about creating a new religion, but about finally and perfectly restoring an ancient one? It's a perspective that really changes just about everything.